All right, welcome to today's lesson on design tokens. For those just getting started, we're going to cover some of the basics and also some of the more advanced concepts. So we're going to start off with some quick definitions around design tokens before looking at getting started with design tokens, how you can choose your tokens, the different types of token collections, how you can assign token roles, before we actually go and build a very small sample variable set. We're also going to talk about the difference between Token Studio, Figma variables, and some other tips as well. Let's get started. All right, so before we get too deep into the weeds, let's cover design tokens just from a definition standpoint. Again, if you're new, what we're going to talk about here, we'll cover throughout the rest of this video. So what are design tokens? Design tokens are the visual elements of a design system and are the named variables, and pay close attention here, that named variables is bolded, that store design attributes. In other words, they're the visual elements that make up our components and give our designs a certain feel. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this. So here I just have the sample button component. Our button component has a white background with black text. The white and black are examples of design tokens. If you want to get a little bit more complex, if you also look at the button, the corner radius, this is not that perfect 90-degree angle. It has a little bit of curvature to it. Whether that curvature is 2, 4, 8, or 12, that would also be an example of a design token, because these are the visual elements that make up our components and are giving our designs a certain feel. Now, with named variables being bolded, let's take a little bit deeper into that. So again, our named variables store our design attributes. So our design attributes, especially in the case of this black text, our design attribute would be a hex code in its purest form. So 000,000. Our design token version of this, so our named variable that makes up this design attribute, would be something like text on action, text action, and we'll cover how you can map to properly get these names a little bit later on in the video. So essentially we're taking just sort of the raw values and what you can almost say is assigning them roles or specific purposes, and that is a real example of your design token. Now, some common design tokens are things like color, radius, typography, and typography is a really interesting one because it's not just your font size. Your font family, your font weight are also examples of design tokens. Borders, shadows, whether it's your X value, your Y value, your spread, those can all be examples of design tokens. Animations, spacing, and spacing is a really important one, especially with auto layout and within Figma, things like your padding and gap, how your different components can adjust across different device sizes, across different modes, super, super important, and also grids as well. All right, now let's look at why design tokens matter. So design tokens allow us to easily change our different design attributes on the fly. And let's take a look at this a little bit more in depth. So what I have here is just 3 buttons along the bottom, each with black text. And I can see here, just based off the visual that I have, is the text in these buttons are pulling from 3 separate hex codes, but the hex codes are the same. So this text is pulling from this text is pulling from this one, so on and so forth. So if I wanted to change the color of the text on all of my buttons to, let's say, something like a red, what I'd have to do is individually and manually go through one by one and change black 1 to red, black 2 to red, and let's say black 3 to red. And you can imagine if you were working with really complex design, maybe you have some complex components, design systems, dashboards, so on and so forth, how tedious and painful it would be in order to change all of the colors or those tokens one by one by one by one by one. Now, design tokens simplifies this process because it's basically saying that all of those attributes are pulling, or all those named variables are pulling from one attribute. In this case, all the text on our buttons is pulling from one variable, our text action. So if I simply wanted to change the color of the text to red, all I would have to do is change one value instead of 3. And that's really the importance of design tokens. It's not only does it keep things consistent, but it makes our lives easier as designers and also developers as well. Now, one of the questions I always seem to be getting asked is, how do I choose my design tokens? Like, where does that come from? Is there a system that builds these for me? Or what's the process behind it? And unlucky for you, if you're new to this, there really is no process behind it except for dissecting your current brand. Now, as an example, let's take a look at this button right here. So UI Collective, we're this purple color. Now, if I'm a designer looking to build out my design tokens, and let's say I already have a brand that I'm working with, all I would really have to do is just go through each of my different components, each of my different designs, and just really take note of what's there in terms of what could be your design tokens. So as an example, let's look at it from our button example again. So we have this background, purple, that's a token. We have this text, the color of this text, that's a token. We also have the font family, which is Poppins. That's also a token. Font weight, also a token. You can even get into things like line height, spacing, also a token. Corner radius, also a token. So you're really going component by component or design by design and taking stock of what are those named variable or what are those attributes that will coincide with a named variable. So in the case of just a simple button, we might have, 6 or 7 different design tokens that we would need to plan for accordingly. So in this case, we might have a token that's a radius of 4. We might have text that's Poppins. That's also the size 12 with a background purple, text size white, or text color white. So if you're building out your design tokens for the first time, you really do need to start off by just dissecting your current brand. There is no system, there is no software that's going to do all of this for you. Now, it can even get even more complex because you might just look at base components, but you need to understand what are some of the other use cases for which you might need tokens. And a great example of this are things like graphs, things like charts, where you can get into some really complex color combinations. Whereas with a component, it's a button that's used all the time. Usually the color of the button does not change, and it really only consists of one color, unless you're using a gradient, of course, but I digress. So still with the case of UI Collective, again, if our base color is this purple, we might have some other colors as well, like this all purple, almost pinkish light, and this really dark purple. That might not necessarily be associated with like our default brand purple color, but there's still tokens that we would need to account for. So again, if you're building out your tokens for the first time, take stock of what it is that you have, and then begin to build your tokens based on that. Now, if you don't have a pre-existing brand already, what you're going to want to do is really just design. Start by building out your components. Understand what you like. Maybe you don't like Poppins as a font. Maybe you like Inter instead. Maybe you don't want a slight curvature of the corners. Maybe you want them to be pill-shaped. What you need to do if you are really looking to build out your design tokens for the first time is understand what you think looks good and what makes sense for your brand. Again, there is no tool or no software that's going to do this for you. It really is all about trial and error. So when choosing your design tokens, again, if you're working with a pre-existing brand, take stock of what you already have. Go through each page design by design and understand all the different tokens that could be there that you would need to plan for. And if you don't have a pre-existing brand, it's really about what look and feel you're trying to achieve and build your design token library from there. All right, so now I'd like to introduce you to the idea of different token collections. So where are these tokens actually being stored? Because again, you don't want all your tokens in just one long list. You need some organization behind your design tokens. So we like to have 3 different collections for our design tokens. The first being our brand. Now, our brand collection just stores all of our colors in just their purest form. So as an example, with the UI Collective brand, let's just say we have a purple color in our brand collection. I'm going to give this our purple color. So I can see it doesn't have a named variable associated with it yet. It's just purple A259FB. So your brand collection just houses all of your different, I don't want to say tokens yet, but just the hex codes, the raw values of what will be your fully complete design tokens. From there, we map these into an alias collection. So we're essentially beginning to assign our different hex codes or the starting point of our design tokens a specific value. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to create a new collection that I'm going to call Alias. Then, in the case of the UI Collective brand, our brand color is this purple. So we want to have our purple as our primary color. So I'm going to say primary, and let's just say maybe it's our default. what I'm going to do then is 2-finger click. And again, I'll show you how to do this a little bit later on in depth, but just for the purpose of this exercise, for now, I am then going to connect this to our brand collection. Again, what this is doing is essentially creating one master design token. So if I wanted to make this a little bit of a darker purple, and I go back into my Alias collection, I can see that now it's a darker purple. So again, instead of having 3 different values, everything's tying back to one value in your brand collection. So let me go ahead and undo that. So, and the reason why we have our Alias collection is, as a designer, someone working with design systems, or even developers as well, how do you know what your primary color is? How do you know what your error color is? Your success color, your secondary color. Your Alias collection is where we're really defining what's primary, what's secondary, what colors are used for what, again, at a very high level. Then what we're going to do is bring this in to our mapped collection, where we're almost assigning it a specific role. So let's create a new collection that we're going to call mapped. I'm then going to create a color value for our text, let's say action, and then we're going to go ahead and connect this to the alias. Again, your brand is connected to your alias, which is connected to your mapped. So let's have a quick refresher. If I was to change this purple, I can see that in the alias, that's also changed. And then in the mapped, that's also changed. So again, each value is connected to one attribute or one base hex code. Let's go ahead and undo that. So in our brand collection, it's just the starting point of our design token in its purest form. Our alias is where we're almost assigning it a specific value just to start. And then our mapped is where we're assigning it a specific role. So for our text action, this might be used for things like a link, like an underline. And let me go ahead and apply that real quick. So our text action, it could also be used for something like a button as well. So maybe in this case, our button is white and that text is purple. So again, in the specifics of each usage would be ideally in some type of documentation relating to your design tokens. But hopefully that makes a little bit sense. And again, later on in this video, we'll go through this with some other examples as well. But hopefully that introduces you to the idea of organizing all of your different design tokens. And again, I have this tree here because you can kind of look at it in almost like a tree. So your brand are all the roots. So it's setting the foundation for your design tokens. Your alias collection is the trunk, which connects the base design tokens, so those hex codes in their purest form, or other values for things like border radius, border widths as well. And it's connecting to our mapped collection, where all of these different design tokens are actually going out into all these different directions that our designers are actually going to consume. So these are what we see, the roots we don't see, and our mapped collection is what our designers or our developers would actually be consuming. Hopefully that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, you have any questions around that, be sure to leave a comment below. I'll be sure to get back to you. And again, we're going to cover this a little bit more in depth later on in this video. Now, if you're just getting started working with your design tokens, actually bringing your brand colors through to your mapped collection, this is a real simple exercise that you'll be able to do on your own. And with this, we're only going to focus on colors to start because colors are arguably the hardest. If you're just getting started, and some of your more number-based tokens, so things like your radius, your shadows, your spacing, that's totally fine just to leave in your brand collection to start until you get more comfortable and advanced when working with your design tokens. That's when you can bring them into your mapped collection. So for now, what we're going to do is really only focus on our colors to start. So what I have here, again, this is a simple exercise, and the template for this, I'll actually put for free to download on uicollective.co. Link for that will be in the description. And be sure to subscribe if you want more free templates. But again, what we're going to do to start, so what I have here is just a simple color scale for the UI Collective brand. Again, this is something that would be in our brand collection itself. And then we're actually going to look at how to bring these colors in, assign them an alias name, and then bring them into our mapped collection, which we're going to do next. But I'm going to hide that for now because this is our alias that we're going to start off with. Now, one thing that I have here is you always need to assign your colors a role. what's your primary color? What are your secondary colors, your tertiary colors, your action colors, error, success, warning, information, neutral, so on and so forth. And these are just some of the common roles that you might see. You might not, in your brand, you might not have a feedback, you might not have a highlight, and that's fine. But again, these are just some of the more common roles that you might see. So what I'm going to do to start, just to keep things simple, again, just a color scale for the UI Collective brand that we have right here, with this color being our base purple. So with this being our base brand color, I'm going to assign this the role of primary. So when I'm building out my mapped collection, what I'm going to need to know is what's my primary default color? Like, what is the main color associated with our brand? Is it this one? Is it this one? Is it this one, or this one? But because this is the color most associated with our brand, I'm going to assign this the scale of default. So in our alias collection then, this would be our primary defaults. Maybe just let me better visualize this here. So primary defaults, set this to hug, and we'll set the background to this one right here. So I know that this is our primary default. Let's then do another quick example. So again, colors that are in the same scale often share the same role. It'd be very, very rare for this color here, if this is our primary default, for this one to be an information, darker. So again, we're going to assign this the same role as primary. But if we look at our scale here, is we only have two above our primary. So this one here would be our dark, and this one here would naturally be our darker. So then this would be our primary darker. And let me visualize that there. So it'd be our primary darker. Oops, I lost my first arrow. There we go. And maybe set this to our whites. So again, that's just a real simple way of building out your alias collection. And maybe let's do one more quick example here for green, or maybe for red actually. So what we're going to do to start, let's just change this to red. That's one red. Let's make this a little bit darker, and then a little bit darker, then a little bit darker, and then let's go red. That's fine, and then red all the way. There we go, just like that. So with your reds, what are reds usually used for? Reds are usually used to let the user know that something's wrong. So in this case, this would be our error. This would also be our error. And with that, these can follow very similar scales, unless you have more reds in your brand that you're working with. So again, this would be our error defaults, and then this would be our error darker. Let's change these colors to visualize. Just like that. And then this would be our error defaults, and our error darker, and our error can't type, and our error defaults. Error. Oops, I really can't type today. There we go, just like that. So hopefully that makes sense as to how you can take some of the color scales that you have in your brand collection, assign them a role and a scale in the alias collection themselves. Next, what we're going to do is actually look at building out our mapped collection. All right, now let's look at bringing our alias colors that we did in the last part of this video into our mapped collection itself. Now, what I have here is when we're actually bringing them into our mapped collection, we always start off with a UI element. Is this color used for our text, our border, our surface, and icon? This can also get more complex into things like your shadows, so on and so forth. But again, if you're just starting, these are probably some that you should just start with. So your text, your borders, your surfaces, and your icons. Now, and then you're going to do is map those into a role. Now, when it comes to the role in your mapped collection, it's fine to still use things like your primary, your secondary, your tertiary, so pretty much the exact same role scale in a way as you did in your alias collection. But what I actually like to do is I like to be a little more explicit with my roles. So instead of having a text primary, a text secondary, because that doesn't really tell you a whole lot about what that text should be used for, like when should you use a text primary versus text secondary. What I like to do is actually define them out into things like your text headings and your text body. The reason being that's just more explicit. So if I'm a designer who's looking to apply a design token, whether it's a variable or through Token Studio, I would know that I would apply my text headings to my headings and my text bodies to my body. one thing you're also going to see as well is oftentimes hover states. And these hover states would pull from the exact same scale as your parent. So in this case, if you have an action color, your action hover would pull from that action scale, but just be a different shade. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, if you have any questions on that, just feel free to leave some questions below, and I'll be sure to get back to you on that. We also do have a whole other guide on some of the naming conventions associated with your design tokens, and I'll put a link for that video in the description as well, and it goes through some of these a little bit more in depth. So again, hopefully that makes sense as to why we're using things like heading and body as opposed to primary and secondary. So I'm just going to go ahead and hide this for now. So to start, what I am going to do is maybe let's focus on our surface, because again, if we're using our purple color, our purple color probably isn't best for being used for things like your heading and your body. It might be used for like a surface action or a surface action hover. And again, using these colors, it'll explain better a little bit of what I was talking about a little bit earlier on, how your action hover states might be pulling from the same scale. So again, what we're going to do is let's take our primary default, and let's map this into our surface. And again, this would be in our mapped collection. And our surface would be our surface action. So now if I was to say set up a button component, let's just say button, just like that. The surface for our button would be this color right here. And again, very similar to what you might see on the UI Collective website. So then let's say if I want my hover state to be a little bit darker, then our primary darker would still be a surface, but it would be a surface action hover in our mapped collection. So when this button would be hovered, this is the color that would be shown. And again, so very similar to how we were doing in our Alias collection, we're defining the role, but we're defining the UI element first. So what's it for? Is it a text, a border, a surface, or an icon? And then what's the role associated with that UI element? And what we're going to do next is actually build out a very sample variable collection, starting off with our grays and then our greens. Our grays will eventually become our text colors, and our greens will eventually become our success colors. So we're going to start off with our grays to start. And again, if you're looking for a full variable library build, we do have some videos on that. Link for those will be in the description. We also do have a free variable starter kit resource. Again, link for that will be in the description. It's also on our website as well. So be sure to check that out and subscribe for more future free templates. So again, what we're going to do is starting off with our brand collection for our grays. So let's go into, our brand. I already have one set up here. That's perfect. So let's start off with our gray. And actually, we're going to categorize them. This is going to be our gray 100. Let's see. We have a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're going to have a gray 200, a gray 300, a gray 400, and then a gray 500. So what I always like to do is actually have, I might actually reposition these. I like to have, oftentimes or more recently, I always like to have my larger colors being the darker ones and the lighter ones being the lower values. So I can see that we have 5 here. So my 300 is actually going to be this one. Our 200 is going to be this one. Our 100 is going to be this one. And then our 400 is going to be this one. And our 500 is going to be this one. So super simple. And that's all it would take for your brand collection associated for your grays. Now, let's go into our Alias collection. And what's the role of our grays? Is it a primary? No. UI Collective is that purple. Is it that secondary? It could be, but for this case, I'm going to say no. And oftentimes, more complex brands or other brands, your secondary is a completely different shade. So we're not going to have our grays be our secondary. Tertiary, it could be you're going to skip that. Action, no. Error, no. Success, no. Information, no. Warning, no. Again, warnings are usually that orange. Informations are blue. But neutral seems like a good fit. And again, this is specific to this exercise. Maybe in your brand, your grays are your tertiary. Maybe they are your action. It's up for you to really define. So in this case, what we're going to do is this one is going to be our neutral. And similar to how we did with the purple and the UI Collective brand, it's going to be our neutral default. So what I'm going to do then is set up a neutral default. So, oops, if I can spell, there we go, a neutral default. And what I'm going to do is I know that this is our 300 value. I'm going to two-finger tap to create an alias. Again, we're tying it back to the color in our brand collection and set that to our gray 300. Let's then do the same for all the others as well. So what we're going to have is a neutral dark. This is our default. So this is our default. Darker, light, and then lighter. And this will just be our defaults. There we go. So we know that let's go back to our brand, that our 400 is the darker one. So let's go to our alias. This will be our 400, and then this will be our gray 500, and then this will be our 200, and then this will be our 100. So still in the brand collection. And this is what we're doing with design tokens, is we're tying them back to one base color in our brand collection. We're not creating new colors for each in each individual collection, because if I change the 400, if I was to go to the alias, you would still have to change in the alias as well. But again, if I change the 400 in our brand, I can see that it affects whatever is assigned the 400 in our alias. Beautiful. So we have all those set up there. So I won't go through it one by one. Hopefully you get the point now, just based off what we did in our variables collection. So we have our neutrals. So we have our neutral default, our neutral dark, our neutral darker, our neutral light, our neutral lighter. Now, if you have a ton of different colors as well, let's say maybe you have like that goes way beyond like the darkest, darker, a ton of different colors, what you can actually do is use what we call 100 scale. So 100 scale being what we're really just doing in our brand collection. So it allows you to go 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, but also in your alias as well. So this would be our neutral 100, our neutral 200, 300, 400, 500. And that's, again, if you're using color scales that are much, much larger, that goes beyond the darkest, the basics that you see right here. And again, a lot of our free downloads, we actually do use those 100 scales. So you might already be familiar by now. So again, what we're going to do then is then bring these into our mapped collection. So our neutral defaults, and again, what our neutrals tend to be usually are text color. So our neutral, this is going to wind up at that text. Let me bring this in a little bit. Layers are all off. Okay, so this is going to be our text. And then let's say we want this one to be our text body. Our text body. So then I would go into my mapped collection, and then let's create a folder for our text, and then our body. And then we're going to tie this back in our alias to our neutral default. So I'm going to create the alias, and then I'm going to go, this is our neutral, this is our default, just like that. Now, what color do I want for my headings? What I always like to have for my headings is something a little bit darker. So I'm going to create a new variable for our text headings. I'm going to say maybe this is our neutral darker. Now, this is a really important trick. As you don't always need to, when in your mapped collection, is you don't always need to follow a specific order. You don't need to go from default to dark. You're totally free to mix and match. One thing I'm also going to say here is that I'm actually going to stop using my neutrals now. Oftentimes, a lot of designers will get tripped up is they tend to think they need a specific role in their mapped collection for every color that they have in their alias collection, which is not always the case. So for me, right now, I'm going to stop using my neutrals for this moment. Now, that's all I'm going to do for my neutrals. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't end up using all the colors in your neutral, but for the purposes of this exercise, really just to get my point across, I just want to highlight two things here that I already mentioned. The first is that in your mapped collection, you don't always need to follow a specific order. And two, you don't need a specific role for each of your colors in your alias collection. Okay, with that out of the way, what we're going to do is actually look at building out a success collection within our brand, alias, and mapped collections, or a success folder within each. And this is where it gets a little bit more complex, where we get into things like our surface, our border, and our icons. All right, so now let's look at our success colors. So very similar to how we did with our neutrals. But again, this one's going to get a little more complex. We're getting to things like our borders, our icons, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do, again, let's set up a new group in our brand collection that we're going to call our green, starting off with 100. We go in here, and then we have 200, 300, 400, 500. And now we name them. So 200, 300, 400, and then 500. And again, similar as we do with the grays, we'll put the 500s as the darker one. And again, it can go inverse as well. Sometimes in the past I have had it reversed. There we go. Let's go with select that one. So again, very similar to what we did in the neutrals, nice and easy, just like that. So now let's go into our alias collection, and where we have neutral, let's create, just as we have neutral, let's create a new folder called success default. Success default. Move this down. So we have, our success default, success dark, and a success darker. And actually, you know what we're actually going to do? Maybe we'll just use 100 scale for the purposes of this exercise. So this could be 100, this could be 500. So a success 500, a success 400, a success 300, a success 200, and a success 100. So just to show you how you can also use your 100 scales here as well. So again, similar to how we did. So this is going to be our success, and then this is going to be our success default. And as we're using our 100 scale, one thing we can do just for the purposes of this exercise, this would be our 500, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This might be 700. This might be 600. This would be our 500. This would be our 400. This would be our 300. This would be our 200. And then this would be our 100. So our success default, if we look in the middle, this would be our default 400 in this case. There we go. Our default 400, although we only really have 5 colors, maybe we'll actually just simplify it. So this would be our default 300. So again, just wanted to show how you can use the 100 scales interchangeably as well. So this would be our brand folder. This would be our 300. This one would be our 400. So again, this would be our success dark. Lost my arrow there at the end, which would be our success dark. Our dark, which would also be that 400. I'm going to get rid of that one. Move this out of the way. So we have our success 300 or success 400. Your brand collection 400. Create the alias. This would be your 500. And then this would be your 200. And then this would be your 100. Green 100 there, exactly. So similar to how we did the neutrals, tying the colors in our alias back to the colors that are in our brand collection. Now, let's get into mapped. So we already have a collection for text, but now what about some of our other common UI elements? So let's start off with our text, actually. So text success. This would be colors that you might use on something like an alert to show text that's been successful or whatever, like an alert to snack bar, so on and so forth. So in this case, I'm going to go into text and create success. I'm then going to tie this back to, that's our 300. I'm going to tie this back to our success 300. So this is going to be our text success. There we go. So I'm going to create the alias and say, tie this back to what is in our alias collection, alias right here. So this is going to be our success 300. Now, what about our border? So let's create a new folder for a border, and we're going to have a border success. So whenever, let's say, a button is in a success state, an alert is in a success state, you might want to have a border around that element. So in this case, what we're going to do is tie this back. And again, this is where we can use this template here in order just to visualize it. So maybe we want our 500 to be that border. And we want that to be our border success. So in this case, again, sometimes with the arrows here, it's probably not the best idea. You might want to change the colors a little bit just to give it a little bit of better visualization. And something like Figma would also work really, really well. So again, we want our 500, our success 500, to be our border success. And again, we're going to visualize all of this at the end. Next, let's go into our surface colors. Maybe let me just delete these just for the purposes of clarity for now. So then let's go in and let's create, so we have our surface folder, so a surface success. And let's say we want our surface success to be a little bit lighter. Let's say we want it to be that 200. So we want that 200 to be our surface success. And let's tie that back to our success 200. Just like that. So our surface success. Now, this is where your roles and really how you're working with your brands can get a little bit complex. Because we have an action hover, maybe we also want a success hover as well. So this is where you feel free to go through and add different roles that you can choose. So our success hover, and maybe we want that to be a little bit lighter. So we want it to be our surface 100. So our success hover, we want it to be our success 100, just like that. Then let's go ahead and I create one for our icon as well. So let's create all variables. Let's go back. Let's create an icon success. And let's say maybe I want it to be that 300, so that base default. So I go in and create the alias of that, and then that would be our success 300. Now let's visualize this all together real quick. So maybe let's create just a real simple alert component here. So process completed. Process is completed. You may now close this page. Something like a snack bar, simple alerts. Let me just create that to our medium. And then let's go ahead and add some auto layout here. And again, this is really just tying in a lot of our elements together. And let's add maybe 50 on that side and then 25 above. Again, it's going to be a real ugly component here, so bear with me. And then let's center these. So let's go ahead and apply some of these elements. So this would be, let's see how it just all comes together. And again, I kind of spitballed it, so I'm not too sure if the color scheme would work. So this is our surface success. This would be our text success. Our text success, I can see that that's not the best. Actually, I'll add our border here as well. So a stroke. And let's go ahead and add our map. So our border success. I think our border success isn't that bad, but I think maybe the surface success could be a little bit lighter. So what I'm going to do then is go into my local variables, change our surface success to that surface 100. And then this is where I might notice that, maybe the colors didn't work as well as originally I wanted to. So what I'm going to do then is actually go back and add another color to my brand collection. This time, let's make it much, much lighter. Something like that. What I can do then is go into my local variables, go back to my brand collection, and then let's add another color here. So let's say maybe this is a 50. 50. There we go. So this is a 50. Let's set this to the shade right here. Let's go into our alias. Let's go to our success. And again, maybe this is a success 50. Sign that in. And then let's go into our maps collection and change the surface success 100 to that 50. And I can see that that component looks a little bit better and might better pass our accessibility checks. So that's just a visualization as to how you can go in, test your different combinations as you're going. If you do need to adjust colors in your brand collection, you easily have the ability to do so in order to achieve the look and feel that you're looking for. All right, so if you're new to working with your design tokens, one thing you probably would have heard of by now is a plugin called Token Studio. Now, Token Studio is very similar to Figma Variables, and that it allows designers an easy way in order to manage their design tokens. And Figma Variables is really based off of the success that Token Studio had and the need for designers to manage their design tokens across different designs. Now, since Variables was first launched in around this time, June 2023 of last year, Figma Variables has caught up quite a bit. Originally, they did not offer things like opacity variables, border width variables, box shadow variables, typography variables, font family, font weight variables. It was really only focused on color to start and some other things as well, things like your string variables, so on and so forth. They didn't really offer support that Token Studio had for things like typography and opacity and all those others that I just mentioned. Since then, Figma Variables has really caught up. Now they offer things like typography support that allows you to adjust things like your font size and actually set a variable for your font size. and things like your font weight and even your font style. And that allows you to change those designs across different modes and also on the fly. But again, if you're looking to manage your design tokens, whether it's in Token Studio or Figma variables, it's really up to you. One of the great things that Token Studio does is actually allows you to sync your design tokens with GitHub. So if you're working with developers, that could be a really great option that could solve a lot of headaches in working with your developers. Figma variables, on the other hand, does not have the functionality in order to sync with GitHub. However, right now, Figma variables and Token Studio are relatively similar in the types of design tokens that they're creating. Now, one thing with Token Studio is it can be a little bit more complex to use. You need to worry about toggling on different collections in order to tie them back, whereas Figma variables is a little bit more simple to use in the grand scheme of things. Token Studio, you'd have to manage different themes, whether it's your global, alias, and mapped collections in order to actually sync those Figma variables. So it can be a little bit more cumbersome. If you are looking to get, if you're just starting out with design tokens, my recommendation would be to use your local variables to start. And then when you're more comfortable and you really want to collaborate more with your developers, maybe then switch over to Token Studio. But again, if you want to start with Token Studio to start, you also do have the ability to sync all of your design tokens in Token Studio with your Figma variables and also your styles as well. All right, so if you're getting started with your design tokens, whether you're just going through the basics or you're looking to become more advanced with the design tokens, one thing you want to avoid is having too many tokens. Oftentimes what I do see in your mapped collection is you have specific groupings for specific components. Things like your button background, as an example, or button surface. Or in your surface collection, you might have a color for your button. You might have a color for, if I can type. You might have a button for an alerts. You might have a button for an alert success, so on and so forth. And you can see if you're going at the component level, we've already have, 3 tokens in our success, our surface folder that are specific to just components. Now, if you have a design system with 40 plus components, you can imagine how complex that actually is, which is why it's best to avoid component level tokens as best as you can. Here's just a really good example where if you're working with surface disableds, again, oftentimes I do see things like this where you have surface disabled text area, surface disabled input, surface disabled autocomplete, surface disabled button, surface disabled menu item. So right there, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tokens that all have the same purpose or the same role. It's the disabled. So why not simply just make this your surface disabled and then connect each of them into your own individual components. So again, they're all tying back to the one token. That's a trick in order to keep your collections nice and organized. Another tip that I often tend to see is designers often tend to overcomplicate things as they go, especially when it comes to your colors. They often tend to start with massive color scales exactly like this one. I know I chatted about this in a video in the past, but it's something if you're just getting started with design tokens or you are a master design tokens, it's something I cannot emphasize enough. It's always best in order to start with a smaller color scale to start and add more colors as you need to. If you need to adjust some of the names as you go, it's way easier to start small and grow up as opposed to starting with a ton of different colors and realizing you need to shrink it as you go in building out your design tokens. So those are just some tips in order to properly maximize and keep your design tokens nice and efficient. Thanks for watching today's video, everyone. I just want to encourage everyone to sign up for uicollective.co and build your community profile. Approved members will get access to lots of great discounts. We're building out our community partners throughout the next couple of weeks, but currently approved community members do get discounts at Typescale, Pika Icon, Iconus, and much, much more are on the way. We're also soon to be releasing our events calendar for the rest of this summer as well, and lots more is on the way. So be sure to check out uicollective.co. We've got lots of great free resources available for you. I'll put a link for this in the description, and hope to see you online. UI Collective, come chat design, come join our free community, and let's keep designing. So hope to see you online, UI Collective.